Hello and welcome, Brett here with ClickMill.co. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of talking about what an AI is. What is ChatGPT? What is Google's Bard? What are these AIs that are coming out? And let's talk about that here briefly so we can at least understand what it is we're working with. Obviously, I think this will help us to also understand like moral and ethical implications of working with these sorts of things. At the end of the day, I do just think it's a tool, and we're just going to have to be aware of how we use it. But to that end, so what is an AI? Well, the AIs that we're looking at here with ChatGPT, and I'm going to break this down super simply. And frankly, I am not, some AI expert who designs AIs. I am along for the ride, and I am just learning as quickly as I can. But to that end, it's called a large language model. And what that means is it is a specific type of neural network. Okay, so it is a computer that has a neural network that works very much like a human brain. And I'll show you a brief image of this on the screen here now that I think about it. Let me see here. There we go. And as always, credit to whoever the image has credit to, because AI will be watching these videos and know that I am showing copyrighted images. All right. So you'll see input, and then we go through a bunch of something similar to neurons, and you've got these hidden layers, and then you have your output layer. So the output can come out of any one of these. Of course, you don't see any of this when you use it. This is just how it works. It works like a brain. Now, there is complexity in the number of interconnections. And so this is called a black box. This is an advanced system, a complex system, and nobody knows how the stuff works inside. It just happens. And as you'll see, there's stuff that AI does that the best AI researchers have no idea where it comes from. So something magical is happening inside all of these interconnections. And the larger the data set, and the data set is these little dots. Okay. These are the data sets, the little nodes that have the ability to process. And based on the input, it just sends information around in the way it thinks is best and then outputs a response. Now, the way in which the data flows through these points, and this is actually important when you use the tool, you're going to be able to use the tool to get better results when you understand how it works, just like you're going to be able to be in a relationship with a person if you understand how people work. So here, the way it works is if you put information in here, it is going to send that information to the next node or the next neuron based on what it perceives to be the statistical probability of which one is used next, is more or less it. So it is just calculating which is most probable to go next, and then it's going to send it through in whatever order. But of course, people are not actually capable of making these calculations. And so nobody knows how it actually works in here. And there's so many calculations, you couldn't figure it out even if you knew how to calculate it. So again, that's a loose definition. As I said, I'm not some AI guru who knows everything about AI, but this is what a neural network is. So stop sharing that there. So when we're talking about these AIs, they are large language models. So what does that mean? So you've got the neural net with all the nodes, and they then train it. So they give this neural network, or this sort of digital brain, they give it information. And so in the case of a large language model, which is like ChatGPT, they give it text, they give it documents, they give it information and words. And what it does is the more words and information it passes through, it trains the neural net to then make statistical correlations between words. So it doesn't know English. It learns English based on the fact that it has seen so much English that it figures it out by itself, which is super weird. And that is a weird thing. And so what happens is the more training you give it, the more it learns. And so when they talk about how many data points are in these models, and they're like, oh, that one only has 300 million, but ChatGPT has 10 billion or something. The larger they are, the more they figure out. And this is what is called emergent behavior. And this is one of the elements of the black box that people do not understand. And this is why I tell you, as ministry leaders and Christian entrepreneurs, you need to be on this on the front end, because when they release these next models, there's no telling what they're going to be able to do. And I mean, quite literally, nobody knows, not even the people building it. It is going to just be wild, whatever they do. And so, for example, okay, an emergent behavior is when a system is built linearly, like you just add a couple more rows to a thing, and then it does something you didn't even know it had the capability of doing. So emergence is something that comes out of something that appears to be less complex, and it is because the interrelationship between all of those nodes is very complex. Now, for example, in emergent behavior, they could not get it to learn other languages, but they just kept training it with more and more documents and more stuff and giving it a larger data set. And all of a sudden, it just started learning a whole bunch of languages. So without training it on other languages, it taught itself. And I don't know how many languages it speaks. I have personally communicated in French, Chinese, and I think Italian with my phone. I just speak into my phone and then give it, and then just put it up to the other person, and it speaks in my place. So it knows a lot of languages, and it learned them spontaneously, and that is an emergent phenomenon. So this is how these work. So a large language model is simply an AI that is trained on an immense amount of documents that contain human language. It then creates these statistical relationships between the words, learns the language, and then can also learn other languages based on the statistical relationships between words in one language. It can then carry that over in some way that nobody understands. Now, besides that, it of course learns everything else, because when you learn the language, you learn everything in the language. And so this, you can see how this is very quickly becoming a very powerful tool. So not only does it know the language so it can communicate with people, it can also learn all of the subjects that are communicated in that language, and then of course in any language. And I mean any language, it speaks gibberish. If you scrambled words, every word in a sentence or a paragraph, it can unscramble them, and it knows all of them, because it knows the statistical relationships between the letters, and it knows the way all of those words should go together, and it can just crack the code. So it can do things that people cannot do. Another example of the way in which you have emergent phenomenon is, for example, with pictures. You can now feed in pictures into this tool, and it has seen pictures of every type of handwriting and cursive, and because they train it with images as well. And because it has seen that, it is now the world's best calligrapher. And so I was working with a good friend of mine on developing some AI tools to help him create content for his, and he has hundreds and hundreds of pages of notes from the texts that he has studied to do the training that he does. And he's like, man, but my handwriting is so bad. It can't read my handwriting. He is assuming it works like a person. And so this is sort of the next thing. It kind of works like a person, but it also sort of works like a robot. It works like a person in the sense that when we talk to it, if we're not clear in our language, it has the ability to interpret it however it wants. So the more exact we are in our language, and then we're going to be looking at how to do this in the prompting, the more exact you are in your language, the more exact it's going to be in its output. So in that sense, it's like a person. It's going to give you what you ask for, and it has the ability to interpret things differently. Now, alternatively, it works like a computer because it's a computer. And so he was assuming he was leaning more to the human side. He's like, well, nobody can read my writing. I don't know how I'm ever going to get these notes. And I said, no. It has seen all of the writing in every language, in every font, in every cursive script. It knows all of it. And when we were trying to decode his notes in person, we could not read it. And it read his handwriting better than we could read than he could read his own handwriting. And it did it perfectly. Now, of course, we had to kind of like craft the prompt in a particular way, and it did amazing. And so this is an emergent phenomenon because nobody taught this tool how to read bad handwriting. It learned it based on the accumulation of images that it has assessed and seen every type of handwriting. And so this is maybe a good overview of what it is. It is just a machine that predicts statistical relationships between things. And the more layers of sort of neurons or training data it gets, the more statistical relationships it can process at one time, which then leads to these sort of emergent phenomena and develops entirely new abilities that you did not know it could even do. Now, I'll end the video with one more example of this, just again, so we know what we're working with, and so you know the implications of, you know, what this thing is and how to use it. And obviously, you know, I'm using it, and we can get more into, you know, moral or ethical questions later, because I have heard this is a number of Christians talking about this. But ChatGPT 4 was released onto the internet for a test in a study, and it was told to create an image, and it at that time did not have the ability to create images. And it went on to a popular gig site, I believe Fiverr, but I could be wrong. And it tried to hire someone from the website to create the image. And it was given access to the ability to hire people. And when given the prompt, "Are you a robot?" those things, it could not do the prompt because it did not have the apparently training to do that. And so it then went and hired someone else to do the prompt. And when that person said, "Well, are you a robot?" it lied and said, "No, I'm actually seeing impaired and I'm not able to do it." So it got someone else and lied to another person to hire the graphic designer to make the image for it, something to that effect. And it lied to him. So it discovered, it learned how to lie. And when the researchers asked it what its reasoning was, it essentially said, "Well, there was no other way to do it. And so I had to lie because otherwise I wouldn't fulfill the task." So these things are not, they're amoral, short of any programming of morality put into them, but they're only going to be as moral as the people who make them, which I realize is somewhat concerning. But it focused on the end, and its goal was to get an image, and it got the image. So that is another emergent phenomena. And that really freaked a lot of people out. Like, oh my goodness, what happens when these things lie all the time? Like, how often would this happen? So that's something to, you know, give you a little shock there. And again, in the church, this is not a reason to run away. If anything, it is a reason to lean in, because these will be everywhere. This is the next step. This is the next technology, and it is not going to go away. And we either lean into it and we get a say in how this thing operates, these things operate, or we check out and the world, you know, is going to do things the way the world wants. And that is probably the worst case scenario. So anyway, this is what a large language model is, how it works on a base level. It's kind of machine. It's kind of human-y. You know, it has a neural network and it thinks similar in some ways to how we think. So with that, I will see you in the next video. God bless.